My landlord said the building was unsafe while collecting rent from 10 other families. I moved into that building about 9 months before everything blew up. At first, it was just another old apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood. Cracked paint, squeaky staircases, the faint smell of dampness in the hallways. Nothing glamorous, but the rent was barely manageable for my salary, and I thought I had lucked out. Most of the other tenants were families who had been there for years. A single mom with a little boy across the hall, an older lady on the second floor who loved gossiping in the lobby, and a rotating cast of delivery guys and young couples trying to save money before buying their first homes. It wasn't perfect, but it felt lived in, human, real. Then, out of nowhere, the building manager slid a notice under every door. I still remember picking it up off the mat that morning before work. It was just one sheet of paper, printed in cheap ink, no city logo, no official stamps. The bold headline read, "For your safety, this building has been deemed unsafe." Underneath, in smaller print, it said tenants should prepare for possible relocation and that continued occupancy is at your own risk. There was no date, no inspection report, no signature except a scrawl that looked like Kerrigan, the landlord's last name. At first, I assumed it was some sort of heads up about maintenance, but the word unsafe stuck in my head like a splinter. That same evening, I came home late from my shift at the clinic and saw something that instantly didn't make sense. Right by the front entrance, Kerrigan himself was standing with a clipboard, knocking on doors, collecting rent in person. I froze for a moment on the staircase, watching him. A woman from the third floor handed him an envelope, whispered something nervously, and he gave her a little pat on the shoulder before moving on. If the building was truly unsafe, why was he still cashing people's rent checks? And why did the notice say one thing while his actions said another? I decided not to confront him that night, but curiosity burned through me. When I got upstairs, I asked my neighbor Milena about it. She's a single mom with a 6-year-old boy, and she looked exhausted as always. She sighed and told me this wasn't the first time Kerrigan had pulled a stunt like this. "Every winter," she muttered. "He claims the place is falling apart, says it's not safe, but he still expects rent. If you ask too many questions, you'll find a lock changed or the water shut off for repairs." She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't think you're special just because you're new. He counts on people being scared." That conversation shook me more than the notice itself. I kept thinking about my own past, how my parents lost our house when I was 15 because of shady mortgage terms. I had sworn never to let anyone blindside me again when it came to housing, but I also didn't want to get kicked out of one of the few affordable places in the city. My stomach tied itself into knots. The safe thing would have been to keep quiet, pay my rent, and hope Kerrigan forgot about me. But the longer I sat in that apartment, staring at the cracks in the wall and listening to the pipes groan, the more the word unsafe echoed in my head. Unsafe for who? Unsafe how? Unsafe unless you paid? The next morning, I checked my mailbox and found another sheet, nearly identical to the first. This one had the same bold unsafe heading, but now it included a line that said, "Temporary occupancy agreements may be arranged directly with management." Translation: pay up in cash and you get to stay. It was so blatant, so brazen, I almost laughed. But then I thought about Milena and her little boy. About the elderly woman, Mrs. Rosa, who lived on the second floor and could barely climb the stairs anymore. They didn't have anywhere else to go. None of us did. And Kerrigan knew it. That evening, a few tenants gathered in the hallway after he left. Mrs. Rosa clutched her cane and told us she'd been in the building for 30 years. She said every few years, he declared it unsafe, but never actually fixed anything. "It's a trick," she whispered. "Scares people into paying whatever he asks. Some move out, and he fills the unit with someone else, usually charging more. He makes it look like he's doing us a favor by letting us stay." She pulled out a shoebox filled with old receipts and notices, each one stamped with the same vague warnings. My neighbor Samir, a young delivery driver who everyone called Sam, offered to help me scan them. "Better to have backups," he said, smirking, "in case the shoebox mysteriously goes missing." That was the first time it occurred to me that maybe we could fight back. But fight how? Kerrigan had the property, the lawyers, the money. We had shaky Wi-Fi and a group chat where half the tenants ignored messages. Still, I went back to my apartment that night, opened my laptop, and started typing up what I had learned. If nothing else, I wanted a record. Because the one thing I knew for sure was this: something was very wrong. A landlord who calls a building unsafe while pocketing rent from 10 different families isn't just careless. He's playing a game, and none of us knew the rules yet. The days after that first unsafe notice felt like living on borrowed time. People were tense. You could hear arguments echoing through the halls. Husbands and wives whisper fighting about whether to start packing. Parents trying to calm down crying kids who thought they were about to be homeless. Every time I came home from work, I braced myself for a new slip of paper on the door. Kerrigan didn't disappoint. On Tuesday night, another notice appeared, this time with bold, underlined words. Management not responsible for accidents or injuries due to unsafe conditions. It was signed again with his scribbled initials. No letterhead, no stamp, just more fear shoved under our doors. That same night, he showed up in the hallway again with his clipboard. I watched from my peephole as he collected envelopes, writing little notes next to people's names. My heart thudded when he knocked on my door. I opened it just a crack, enough for him to see my face. He smiled, if you could call it that, and said, "Rent due, miss. You want to keep your spot?" I told him I'd already mailed the check like always. His smile dropped. Mail's unreliable. Better to handle things direct. I closed the door slowly, locking every bolt, my hands shaking. Through the peephole, I saw him stand there for a full minute before moving on. The next morning, I ran into Sam in the stairwell. He had his phone in his hand, grinning like he'd caught something juicy. "Check this out," he whispered, showing me a short clip he'd recorded on his cheap camera pointed at the hallway window. It showed Kerrigan slipping an envelope into his coat pocket, counting bills, then smirking as he jotted something on his clipboard. "He knows exactly what he's doing," Sam said. "But proof is proof. The more we collect, the harder it is for him to wriggle out." Meanwhile, life inside the building kept reminding us why we all stayed despite everything. The old pipes rattled so loudly at night it sounded like someone hammering the walls. Paint peeled from the ceilings. In one corner of the basement, water pooled constantly, and the smell of mildew was so strong it clung to your clothes. Unsafe wasn't just a word Kerrigan threw around. It was our daily reality. But instead of fixing it, he used it like a threat. Then came the storm. One Friday night, the rain came down so hard it felt like the whole roof was going to cave in. Around midnight, I heard a crash in the hallway and rushed out barefoot. A chunk of plaster had fallen from the ceiling, scattering dust and debris across the floor. Milena was crouched nearby, shielding her son with her arms. He was crying, covered in white powder. I helped her carry him into my apartment, where we cleaned him up and checked for cuts. Thankfully, he was fine, just terrified. Milena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the washcloth. "What if it had been worse?" she kept saying. "What if it had been a brick wall or the ceiling above his bed?" We called emergency services, and within an hour, 2 firefighters showed up, took one look at the ceiling, and filed a report. They told us to avoid the hallway until repairs were made. They didn't shut down the building, but the word structural weakness was written in their notes. We thought for sure this would trigger something real, maybe even force Kerrigan to act. Instead, the next morning, he slid yet another note under our doors. "All residents advised to use extra caution. Temporary hazards being addressed. Continue occupancy at your own discretion." Nothing about repairs, nothing about responsibility, just more hollow words. That Saturday, a few of us gathered in Mrs. Rosa's apartment. She brewed tea on her ancient stove while Sam set up his laptop, showing us all the recordings he'd saved. Milena sat quietly in the corner with her son asleep on her lap. Mrs. Rosa pulled out another stack of yellowed papers from her shoebox. "He's been playing this game for decades," she muttered. "Unsafe here, unsafe there. But somehow it's always safe enough for him to take the rent." She held up an old receipt from 2003 with nearly identical wording to the notices we were receiving now. My stomach dropped. This wasn't some new scam. It was his whole business model. We debated what to do. Some tenants wanted to call the city inspector right away. Others said it would just make things worse. Sam argued that we needed undeniable evidence before involving anyone official, because inspectors had come before and somehow never found anything serious enough to fine him. "He probably knows someone," Sam said grimly. "You don't stay in business this long pulling the same stunt without connections." That possibility made everyone quiet. That night, I lay awake in bed listening to the rain still dripping through the walls, thinking about my parents' foreclosure years ago. The same feeling of helplessness was creeping back. Like no matter what we did, someone bigger and richer was going to win. But then I thought of Milena's little boy, and the dust in his hair, and Mrs. Rosa clutching her cane while talking about 30 years of notices. It wasn't just about me. If we didn't push back, Kerrigan would keep doing this forever. The realization scared me, but it also hardened something inside. For the first time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could fight him if we stuck together. The following Monday, the inspector finally showed up, supposedly in response to the firefighters' report. We crowded in the lobby as he walked through with a clipboard, barely glancing at the crumbling walls. He poked the ceiling where the plaster had fallen, jotted down something vague, and shrugged. "Doesn't look catastrophic," he said. "Just keep the area clear until repairs are made." We begged him to look at the basement, but after a quick glance he called it manageable moisture. Then he left. No fines, no violations, nothing. It was like watching justice slip through our fingers in real time. That evening, Kerrigan sent a message in the group chat he never used before. Reminder: tenants who remain current on rent will have priority during any safety renovations. Those who fall behind may be asked to vacate immediately. The message ended with, "Unsafe living is better than no living." We all stared at it in disbelief. Unsafe living is better than no living. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a scam anymore, it was a threat, and I realized then that staying quiet wasn't an option. If we didn't act soon, he was going to bury us in his lies. After that message in the group chat, something shifted in me. I'd been holding on to the idea that maybe this was just sloppiness, some twisted way of cutting corners. But unsafe living is better than no living? That wasn't negligence. That was Kerrigan saying the quiet part out loud. And I wasn't the only one who felt it. The chat, usually half-dead, started buzzing. People who'd stayed silent for months were suddenly posting screenshots of rent receipts, photos of leaks, clips of crumbling walls. The fear was still there, but anger was starting to creep in too. Sam came to my apartment that night with a USB stick. He dropped it on my kitchen table like it was a weapon. Every clip, every photo, every notice scanned. Backed up twice. If he tries to deny this, we'll bury him. He grinned, but his eyes were serious. He'd even organized the files by year, starting with Mrs. Rosa's oldest papers. It was like watching a timeline of abuse stretch across decades. Every few years, the same cycle. Unsafe notice, veiled threats, rent collection. The dates lined up too neatly to be coincidence. I volunteered to write everything into one document, a narrative, like a report. My hands shook as I typed. Part of me kept expecting Kerrigan to burst through the door and snatch the laptop away. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I included the plaster collapse, the gas leak complaints, the basement photos. I cross-referenced Rosa's old receipts with Sam's hallway videos. By midnight, I had 30 pages of evidence. It was messy, emotional, not something a lawyer would draft. But it was proof. The gas leak came 2 days later. I was walking back from work when I smelled it. Sharp, metallic, unmistakable. By the time I got inside, half the tenants were standing in the hall with their hands over their mouths. Someone had already called 911. The fire department showed up fast, evacuating the building while they aired it out. One of the firefighters told me quietly, "This isn't minor. You're lucky someone noticed his report used the phrase imminent hazard." For once, there it was in black and white. Undeniable proof. We thought this would finally be the end of Kerrigan's game. But when the city came back the next morning, the inspector gave us the same blank look. Hazard was addressed temporarily, he said. Ventilation improved. He didn't order the building closed. He didn't cite Kerrigan, just told us to remain cautious. I wanted to scream. How could an imminent hazard vanish overnight? Sam muttered that the inspector was probably on Kerrigan's payroll. Nobody disagreed. That evening, Milena knocked on my door. She was pale, clutching her son's backpack. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't put him at risk, but I can't afford to leave either." Her hands were trembling so badly that I guided her to the couch. Her son was curled against her side, half asleep. She looked at me with eyes so desperate it made my chest ache. "If you do something, I'll stand with you," she said. That was the moment I knew I couldn't back down, no matter how scared I was. The next day, I called the local legal aid office. I expected to be brushed off, but instead I got patched through to a woman named Lillian. She had a sharp, clipped voice, the kind of tone that said she'd heard every landlord horror story under the sun. I explained everything. The notices, the rent collection, the plaster collapse, the gas leak. She listened quietly, then asked, "Do you have documentation?" When I told her about the files, her voice sharpened. "Good, very good. Back them up in multiple places. Don't keep everything in your apartment. Landlords like this sometimes get creative." The way she said it made me shiver. She promised to review what I sent and advised me to start a tenant association, even informal. "There's power in numbers," she said. That night, Sam and I set up a private group chat separate from Kerrigan's. We added everyone we trusted. At first, only a handful joined, but soon the chat grew to nearly every tenant. People started sharing horror stories, unexplained fees, sudden lock changes, water shutoffs labeled as repairs. One neighbor even confessed she'd been paying cash security deposits every 6 months just to keep her lease. The scale of it hit me hard. Kerrigan wasn't just a bad landlord. He was running a long-term shakedown. Halfway through writing my notes, I realized my laptop battery was nearly dead. I plugged it in and stared at the screen, thinking about how much was at stake. If Kerrigan got wind of this, he could retaliate. He'd done it before. Mrs. Rosa told us about a tenant years ago who complained too loudly and came home to find their door locks changed overnight. They had to leave everything behind. But then I remembered Milena's voice, shaking as she promised to stand with me. I remembered her son coughing in the plaster dust. Fear twisted in my gut, but something stronger started to form beside it: determination. The turning point came when Sam caught another video. This time, it wasn't just envelopes. It was Kerrigan himself, standing in front of two tenants, saying, "Unsafe means you do as I say. Unsafe means you pay, or you're out. Don't like it? Sleep on the street." His voice was sharp, cruel, impossible to misinterpret. Sam looked at me afterward, his face pale. "We've got him. This is it." We sent the clip to Lillian that same night. She called me back within an hour. "This is gold," she said, "but it's dangerous. He'll know someone's recording him. Be careful. Don't confront him directly. Build your case quietly. Let me handle the legal side." I barely slept. Every creak of the building made me jump. I kept imagining Kerrigan breaking down my door, demanding to see my laptop. But in the middle of that fear, something solidified. We weren't powerless anymore. We had evidence, we had witnesses, and for the first time, we had each other. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of the basement water, rising and rising. But instead of drowning us, it carried all our receipts, notices, and videos up to the surface where everyone could see them. I woke up drenched in sweat but strangely calm. Kerrigan had built his empire on fear and secrecy. We were about to rip the cover off both. The retaliation didn't take long. Within days of us sending the video to Lillian, the lights went out on half the building. At first, we thought it was another storm knocking out power. But when Sam checked the breaker box in the basement, he found the main switches deliberately flipped. He caught a blurry video of the building manager slinking away from the panel with a flashlight in hand. By the time we got the power back on, dozens of refrigerators had already started to warm up, groceries spoiled, milk curdled, and the stench of rotting food crept through the hallways. When we confronted Kerrigan in the group chat, he responded with one line: "Temporary safety maintenance. Stop complaining or relocate." That was it. No apology, no explanation. He wanted us to know he was in control. Then came the notices taped directly onto doors. Milena found one on hers one morning, an overdue rent warning, even though she'd paid on time and had the receipt to prove it. In red ink, it said, "Final notice before eviction." She broke down crying in the hallway while holding the paper, and her son clung to her leg, asking if they had to sleep outside. I ripped the notice off and stuffed it into my bag. We added it to the evidence pile. The psychological pressure was brutal. Every knock on the door felt like a threat. Every slip of paper under the mat made my stomach twist. Mrs. Rosa called me late at night, whispering that someone had rattled her doorknob for nearly a minute before walking away. "He's trying to scare me out," she said, her voice trembling. "He knows I can't fight him." I promised her she wasn't alone, but I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Meanwhile, Sam doubled down. He rigged his hallway camera to record directly to cloud storage, so even if someone smashed it, the footage would survive. He also showed me how to back up our files onto multiple drives and email accounts. "If Kerrigan thinks he can scare us into deleting proof, he's in for a surprise," he said. His bravado kept us steady, even when the atmosphere in the building felt suffocating. My own life started to unravel under the stress. I was late to work 3 times in 1 week because of sudden water shutoffs that forced me to scramble just to get ready. My supervisor pulled me aside and told me housing drama wasn't an excuse for tardiness. The implication was clear. Keep this up, and I'd lose my job. That night, sitting in the dark after another power cut, I realized Kerrigan wasn't just threatening our apartments. He was threatening our entire lives. But we weren't completely powerless. Lillian called me after reviewing the growing evidence folder. "You've got enough to file for a restraining order against unlawful eviction tactics," she said. "And you can push for a court-appointed manager to take over the property. But you'll need every tenant on board. He'll try to divide you." She told me to organize a meeting. My stomach lurched at the thought, but I agreed. The meeting took place in Mrs. Rosa's apartment on a rainy Sunday evening. The living room was cramped, but almost everyone came. Milena sat with her son asleep on her lap. Sam leaned against the wall, and Mrs. Rosa presided from her armchair like a weary general. People shared their stories, some through tears, some through clenched jaws. We laid the notices, receipts, and video clips out on the coffee table like ammunition. When I asked if they'd be willing to sign a collective statement for legal aid, there was silence at first. Then one by one, hands went up. "If he wants to fight," one father of 3 muttered. "Let's fight." It was the first flicker of hope, but Kerrigan must have sensed it because the very next day he escalated. At dawn, we woke to find giant orange stickers slapped on the front entrance. "Do not enter. Unsafe structure." They looked official at first glance, but when Sam peeled one off, he noticed the font was wrong and the seal was just a blurry printout. Fake. Kerrigan had made counterfeit hazard signs. Neighbors driving by saw them and assumed the building was condemned. Panic spread fast. Kids cried. Parents argued in the lobby. Some started hauling bags out to cars. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. It was a man's voice, low and threatening. "Stop stirring people up or you'll regret it. Unsafe buildings have accidents. My chest went ice cold. I played it 3 times just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. I saved the audio and sent it straight to Lillian. She told me not to delete it, not even to clear it from voicemail. This isn't just intimidation anymore, she said. It's harassment. It's criminal. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Sam, Milena, and Mrs. Rosa. We were exhausted, scared, but determined. He wants us isolated, each one too afraid to resist, I said. But we're stronger together. If we don't push back now, he'll crush us. Sam raised his phone, showing us the cloud folder filled with videos, scans, and screenshots. Then we hit him where it hurts, he said. We go public. The decision wasn't easy. Going public meant risking lawsuits, smear campaigns, retaliation 10 times worse. But as I looked around at Milena's son curled up under a blanket on my couch, at Rosa's tired eyes, at Sam's defiant smirk, I realized we didn't have a choice anymore. Kerrigan had crossed too many lines. The next morning, I drafted an email and attached the most damning evidence. The video of Kerrigan admitting, "Unsafe means you pay," the fake hazard notices, the eviction threats. I sent it to a local journalist whose articles I'd read before about housing scandals. My finger hovered over the send button for a long time, my heart pounding. Then I pressed it. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Kerrigan thought fear would keep us quiet. Instead, it pushed us into the spotlight. And once the truth was out, there would be no taking it back. The journalist replied faster than I expected. Less than 12 hours after I hit send, she called me directly. Her name was Anna, and she had a calm but firm voice that immediately made me feel like she'd seen 100 landlords like Kerrigan before. "I've looked at your files," she said. "If half of this checks out, it's going to be big, but I'll need on-record statements from multiple tenants, not just you. And I want to be present when the city inspector comes back." My throat went dry, but I agreed. This was it. The line between whispering in hallways and shouting into a megaphone. We gathered everyone in the basement that evening. The musty smell of mildew hung in the air. But for once, nobody seemed defeated. Sam had brought his laptop and projected the evidence onto the concrete wall. Kerrigan's fake hazard stickers, the hallway video, the voicemail threat, the decades of identical notices. One by one, tenants stepped forward and said they'd be willing to speak to Anna. Even Mrs. Rosa, who had lived through 30 years of intimidation, nodded firmly. "If I go down, I'll go down telling the truth," she said, and everyone applauded softly. The tension before the inspection was unbearable. Kerrigan must have gotten wind of it because suddenly he was in the building more often, lurking in the hallways, muttering about ungrateful tenants. Twice I saw him whispering with the inspector in the lobby, his hand clapping the man's shoulder a little too familiarly. Fear gnawed at my stomach. What if the whole system was rigged? What if no matter how much evidence we had, they'd sweep it under the rug again? The morning of the inspection, Anna showed up with a camera crew. I thought some of the tenants would back out when they saw the microphones, but nobody did. In fact, people lined up to show her their apartments. The water damage, the cracked plaster, the mold spreading across bedroom walls. Milena held up the bogus eviction notice for the camera, her voice shaking but steady. "He's been trying to scare us out for months," she said. "But where are we supposed to go? He knows we can't afford anywhere else." The inspector arrived late, looking irritated by the cameras. He did his usual routine, poking at the walls, tapping his clipboard, muttering, "Not catastrophic." But this time, we were ready. Sam pulled out his phone and started a live stream in the private tenant group, broadcasting the inspection in real time. When the inspector brushed off the collapsed plaster as minor, Sam played the firefighter's report aloud, "Imminent hazard." When the inspector downplayed the gas leak, Milena stepped forward with the official call log and medical notes about her son's coughing. Piece by piece, we boxed him in. Then came the breaking point. Kerrigan himself showed up, red-faced, sweating through his shirt. He barked at Anna's camera crew to leave, but they didn't budge. Finally, he shouted, "This whole place is unsafe. Unsafe means you do as I say or you're out." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Sam's phone caught every second. People gasped. Some even laughed in disbelief. He had just repeated the exact threat from the earlier video, this time in front of witnesses and cameras. Anna turned to the inspector. "You just heard that. Are you still going to say everything looks fine?" The inspector froze, caught between the evidence and the cameras. For a long moment, it felt like he'd try to wriggle out again. But then something shifted in his face. Maybe self-preservation, maybe guilt. He cleared his throat and said, "We'll need a full structural review, effective immediately. Management is barred from making unilateral occupancy decisions." For the first time, Kerrigan's mask cracked. He tried to argue, but the inspector raised a hand. "Enough. You've overstepped." The relief was electric. Tenants clapped, some cried. Mrs. Rosa leaned on her cane and whispered, "Finally." Milena hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Sam punched the air like we'd just won a championship game. For the first time, the balance of power shifted in our favor. Of course, Kerrigan didn't back down quietly. That evening, he sent a long rant in the group chat. Threats of lawsuits, claims that the footage was doctored, promises that we'd all regret humiliating him. But it was too late. The journalist already had the story drafted, and the inspector had put the building under review. The fear that had paralyzed us for months was gone, replaced with anger and solidarity. Anna stayed behind to interview more tenants individually. She told me quietly, "He's not just going to lose this building. Once this goes public, they'll start looking at his other properties too." I nodded, adrenaline buzzing through me. For the first time in months, I felt hope, not just for us, but for all the families he'd exploited over the years. That night, the building was alive with energy. Kids ran in the hallways, adults chatted in clusters, someone even brought down a speaker and played music softly in the lobby. It wasn't victory yet. We knew court battles were coming, but it was the first taste of freedom. I sat by my window, listening to the laughter echo up the stairwell, and thought he tried to bury us in fear. Instead, he planted a rebellion. The story broke 2 days later. Anna's article hit the front page of the local paper and spread online like wildfire. The headline screamed, "Landlord declares building unsafe," while collecting rent from 10 families. It included screenshots of Kerrigan's bogus notices, the hallway videos, and a photo of Milena holding her son with that eviction warning in her hand. Our building, forgotten for decades, was suddenly the center of attention. Neighbors we didn't even know came by to slip notes of support under our doors. Strangers offered us food, legal advice, even temporary housing. Kerrigan, predictably, tried to spin it. He issued a statement claiming he'd only called the building unsafe, out of an abundance of caution, and that we had misunderstood his words. He accused the tenants of a smear campaign, but the damage was done. The voicemail threat, the fake hazard stickers, the video of him yelling "unsafe means you pay," none of that could be explained away. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons, and for once people were listening to us instead of him. The city acted faster than anyone expected. Within a week, a judge appointed a temporary manager to oversee the building. Kerrigan was barred from contacting tenants directly. He showed up once trying to storm inside, but police escorted him off the property. Seeing him shoved back across the street while we stood in the lobby together was surreal. It was like watching a schoolyard bully finally get dragged to the principal's office. Repairs began almost immediately. Crews patched the ceiling where plaster had collapsed, sealed the gas lines, and tore out chunks of moldy drywall. The basement pumps finally got fixed, and for the first time, the sour smell of mildew started to fade. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. Kids could run down the hall without parents panicking at every creak in the walls. Mrs. Rosa cried when workers reinforced the stair railings she'd been clinging to for years. "I thought I'd die in this building before anyone cared," she whispered. Of course, there were setbacks. The court battle dragged on for months. Kerrigan's lawyers tried every trick, accusing us of trespassing, of harassment, even of defamation. But with Lillian's help, we countered every move. Each piece of evidence chipped away at his credibility. When the voicemail was played in court, the judge's face tightened with disgust. When the video of him yelling was shown, one juror actually shook their head in disbelief. Piece by piece, his empire of intimidation crumbled. Eventually, Kerrigan agreed to a settlement. Hefty fines, repayment of illegal fees, and a court order to step back from managing any of his properties for the foreseeable future. The building stayed under city management until permanent renovations could be completed. He walked away furious but powerless. We, the tenants he had dismissed as complainers, had beaten him. The night we got the news, we gathered in the courtyard with folding chairs and string lights borrowed from a neighbor. Someone grilled hot dogs, someone else brought a radio. It was a celebration, but also a release of months of fear. Milena's son ran around chasing fireflies, free in a way he hadn't been since the plaster fell on his head. Mrs. Rosa raised a plastic cup of soda and toasted, "To unsafe living, made safe by us." Everyone laughed and clapped. Later, as the party wound down, I sat with Sam on the steps. He leaned back, exhausted but grinning. "We did it," he said. "Not just you or me, all of us." He thought we'd stay quiet forever, but we didn't. I nodded, staring up at the patched roof silhouetted against the night sky. For the first time since moving in, I felt like I belonged. Weeks later, Anna published a follow-up article about Kerrigan's other properties. Turns out, he'd pulled the same stunt across the city for decades. Now every building he owned was under review. Tenants from all over were reaching out, inspired by what we'd done. It hit me then that our fight wasn't just about saving one building. It was about exposing a system built on fear and silence. Still, the personal aftermath wasn't simple. Some tenants eventually moved out once they could afford better places. Milena transferred her son to a new school in a safer district. Mrs. Rosa decided to stay, stubborn as ever, saying, This is my home. They won't push me out. Sam started talking about law school, half joking that he'd make a career out of fighting landlords. And me? I stayed too. I wanted to see the building through, to watch it transform from a crumbling trap into something livable, maybe even hopeful. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the first notice I found under my door. For your safety. This building has been deemed unsafe. I keep it in a drawer now, creased and yellowing. It's a reminder of how fear almost worked, how close I came to packing my bags and leaving in silence, but also a reminder of what happens when ordinary people refuse to be bullied. Unsafe, Kerrigan said. Unsafe unless you paid. But he was wrong. The real danger was never the cracked plaster or the rusty pipes. The real danger was letting someone profit from our fear, and once we stopped letting fear rule us, the building wasn't just safer. It felt like home.